The topic of discussion for this video is the company secretary mandatory for a Singapore company? And who can be the company secretary? And we will also have a look at responsibilities of company secretary and how the role has evolved in modern times. First of all, when you hear the term company secretary, don't confuse the word secretary with somebody like this who is the office secretary. People have a tendency to consider that company secretary to be somewhat like this, who can help in arranging meetings and take care of routine company matters. Instead, the role of a company secretary is more like this. The role is a legal in position. Company secretary is a legal position under the Companies Act, and that position has specific responsibilities and powers. So this is a part that you need to understand well. So let's have a look what the law says. So the legal provision mentions, according to section 171 1AA of the Companies Act of Singapore, a company must appoint a company secretary within 6 months of the incorporation and registration of the company. In case the appointment is not made in 6 months, then the directors of the company will be held responsible and may have to pay fines for the lapse. So the legal provision makes it clear that the appointment of a company secretary is mandatory. Now, who can act as the company secretary for a Singapore company? So the secretary must be a natural person. That means an individual. You cannot appoint a corporate entity or any other legal entity to be the secretary of the company. Secondly, the secretary must be resident in Singapore. That means the secretary must be at least either citizen, permanent resident, or in rare cases, employment pass holders who are in the profession of company secretary can also be appointed as company secretary of other companies. In case of a public limited company, the secretary must be a qualified person, and qualified person means a person who is a member of a Singapore Company Secretaries Association, or a person who is a chartered accountant, or a person who is a member of International Accountants Organization, or an accountant, and otherwise a person who has been doing secretarial business for last 5 years. In case of a private limited company, there is no such requirement. So in case you are appointing your friend or your relative as a secretary, then that is possible. However, when it comes to public limited companies, a qualified person needs to be appointed. Now, one more point to remember is if the company has a single director, then same person cannot act as the secretary of the company. If you have two directors, then one of the director can be director as well as secretary. But in case of single director, that is not possible. So you will have to understand this requirement. So the next point is, what does company secretary do in the company? What are his or her responsibilities? So basically, company secretary is a guardian of company documents, and he has the responsibility to oversee all the board meetings, oversee all the shareholders meetings, act as a custodian of company documents, maintain all the registers of the company, keep track of important deadlines for the company as to the filing of annual return and filing of IRAs. Also, company secretary has to file the annual return and any other transaction pertaining to the company into the ACRA system. For example, activities like change in the officers, appointment of new officers, entering resignation of officers into the ACRA system. And lastly, company secretary may be called to attest company documents and contracts occasionally. So how has the role of company secretary evolved in current times? So as you can see, in the current times, the companies typically tend to be very small. I mean, many small businesses are also registered as a private limited company, and these companies will typically have one or two shareholders or directors. So obviously the role of company secretary in these companies has reduced a bit. In the sense, it is not as complex as it used to be in past. Moreover, many corporate secretarial firms like ours, we use software to keep tab of deadlines for our client data. So sending reminders and reminding customers to prepare the accounts is now quite easy. 8-10 years back, people were doing all this manually by sending these email reminders, and that used to take quite a lot of time. So as such, you can see even companies small in size, the scope of the work is somewhat reduced for company secretaries, and therefore the cost has also reduced. So nowadays you can find company secretary for 1 year. You will be able to get it for less than maybe 600, 700 Singapore dollars, whereas 10 years back this cost was at least $1,000. So, in summary, company secretary is a legal position in the company. Appointment of company secretary is mandatory.
Thank you for watching this video. This video was brought to you by Epica Consulting Singapore. Subscribe to our channel today to get notified when new videos are posted.